Hi, my name is Doug from Central Texas, and I built my first go-kart from scratch. Well, I built my first go-kart period, and I went with the people from Go Power Sports in Keller, Texas, which is near Fort Worth, Texas. I'm about 200 miles away. I actually drove up there and met them, and it was pretty neat. It wasn't a necessary trip. I could have done everything on the phone. They're These people know what they're doing. They've got everything possibly you could need for a go-kart. So if you're thinking about building a go-kart, and I actually bought a kit from them that included everything: the seat, the tires, the steering wheel, steering column, everything. Good people. And this is by far no advertisement on these companies. I just felt I'd give them a little bit of shout out. Next, I used JD Squared tubing notcher and tubing bender. This was the first project I ever did with it. I'd just gotten it several weeks prior to building my go-kart. I'd made a few sample bends, but after I figured out the mathematical side of it, the pipe I bend, their equipment is so good and so precise that I bent my tubing with basically two fingers, or I could have. I didn't use two fingers, but I literally tried it a couple times, and there's enough leverage on their bender that you could bend 0.83 tubing with two fingers. Next is burn tables, which is my CNC plasma table. Really good folks. It can answer any question you've ever had. They make a really good table. It's actually made in Central Texas also. But you'll see in the video that I not only made some strength with gussets and stuff, but I made some little bit of flair to the go-kart that I couldn't have done if I hadn't had a burn table. This is what I started out with. I did not start with any drawings or dimensions. I'm building this go-kart for my grandkids, and I actually had them lay down against the back of a cabinet one night, and I measured the length of their feet and how far out their hands would reach. And then after I got my motor and everything from Go Power Sports, I laid everything out on the floor. And it ended up working really well. I would maybe not suggest that for everybody, but that's the way I did it. I'm fortunate enough to have a real long level, so when I put on my bearing hangers for the rear axle, not only am I getting it going straight with the go-kart, it's actually perpendicular off the pipe. There it is. I tack welded both sides, and then kind of visually went back and looked, and everything worked really good on that. I selected bigger tires for the back, quite a bit bigger, so my go-kart was slightly tilting downhill in the front. So I had to offset, from this being perpendicular with the ground, I had to offset it so with that slope they would be at a right angle to the ground, which I don't know if you were off a little bit whether it would really matter, but it didn't take any extra time, and in this way the wheels are turning perpendicular to the ground. It worked out really well. Here's one of my gussets for strength. This is the backside, and sure, you could have cut this with any, you could have cut this out by hand, but I was able to cut the corners round and actually cut out the inside of the triangle to cover that weld. I cut this out on the CNC table. It's a slot for the brake rod to go through. There's another picture of it coming from the pedal and going down. This is a brake mechanism I kind of made. I made all my rods and extensions myself, but the brake cable or the brake rod, instead of having it come off at an angle to this and possibly binding up, I came straight back and then moved over with, basically this is a hinge that I made. There's a couple of pictures of that, and there's more of it. I've actually even put a grease fitting on it. It's got a nylon spacer to keep it spaced out. I welded just a few little light washers for a little bit of spring to bring it back. Even though the pedal's got a spring, this kind of helps bring the whole thing back. Another picture of it. There it is. There's the disc brake on the kart itself. Now, the only thing I did not use that I got from Go Power Sports was the engine mount. It was a good one. There was nothing wrong with it. But being my first go-kart, I wanted to make sure I had enough slide on my motor to adjust the chain. And so I made one on my CNC table with the slots, and this is 1/4-inch plate, welded to 1/4-inch strap metal, and actually a piece of angle iron in the middle for strength. There's the seat assembly I built. The thing came with a seat and the extensions or the slides. Here it is on my table, just setting up. And at the end of the video, this is my X clamping table that I kind of came up with. And this is a clamp that's clamped from the middle of the table. And I'm going to post a link at the end of the video. They provided some brake or some pedal stops. I just went with rods, to hold the spring and to make my stops. This is the brake side, and you kind of see I made my own rods and extensions. And so here we get into bending the tube. I don't know if I said previous, on the straight tube, I used 0.95, but on the bending tube, I used 0.83. Even though it would very easily bend to 0.95, this is seamless, non-welded tubing. They make it on some sort of mandrel, and it's like 4 times the cost of the 0.83. And it is a little bit stronger, so I used it for my strength. But where I bent, I bent with my tubing bender. There's a seat bracket again on it. There it is, kind of finished with the seat, the roll bar. I did a little extra bending here. These are my grandkids. They're from 11 to 9, and I wanted them safe and not being a fallout. And so I put a little extra roll cage, if you will, on that side or on the sides. This was a lot of fun. Probably the most fun I've ever had in my shop in the last forever. In a couple, 3 days, I had a blast, like building the brake and bending this tube and basically putting it where I wanted it. I did it for strength. Like this one's connected to the top roll bar, but it's connected in 4 spots. And there you can see the seat mount and a better picture of the motor mount. Then I had a lot of fun bending this piece for the front bumper. I mean, why not? You've got a bender, and it's so precise that I was able to bend this round shape, oval shape, and kind of go for it. There's a better picture of it. A little more detail. There's with the steering on it. There's another picture of the high back roll cage. Now this is where the CNC plasma table helped me. After I bent this shape, I was able to cut this out and weld it in place in between these 2 pieces of pipe. And I actually could cut out that piece also. It made a lot of fun, and having a CNC table really helps. There's the finished go-kart. And so if you want to stop watching, I've got a few more pictures of maybe non-so-trivial type stuff, but I was able to cut this out. So the shaft of the steering is going through 3 bushings. A little extra support. There's another picture of it. Just another picture of the painted finished product. Go-kart came out really well. It's nice and clean. I put the kill switch right there. I actually bought a little $15 tachometer and hour meter. And one thing I did a little different, I put a piece of conduit all the way into the back on the down underneath the cart. So my wires aren't exposed. They're not going to get kicked off. Now this is something I totally did different. This is a steering column, and it comes with two galvanized type bushings that you would weld to a piece of metal. Well, when you weld something, it tends to warp the metal a little bit. So I was a little bit concerned with this. So I found these brass bushings that were milled perfectly. I think they're 1/2 inch by 3/4 inch. And my theory is, and it works as well as the fittings I did get, but let's say this does get bound up someday. Well, the bushing itself can turn because it's a 3/4 inch hole, but it doesn't have any slack in it. It's just you've got two positions for it to, and there's a picture of the bushing. There's a collar stop, but here's the bushing, and then the bushing expands through the wall. So it is not welded in place. I can take my steering wheel off, take all those bushings off, clean them up. There's another picture of the brake assembly finished, painted. There's the go-kart. Came out really good. The grandkids haven't ridden it yet, but I took a little test drive, and while holding a phone, I got up to 27 miles an hour, kind of slightly going uphill. So I'm real curious if I'm going to have to tone it down a little bit for them. There's that front bumper. It came out really well. The one thing I did do a little different, I put the throttle cable in a little tube that's welded and painted so it's not exposed. It goes out the back. Now I did sandblast at 100%. It took me a couple hours. I have a pretty nice barrel blaster, or not a pot blaster, and sandblasted every part to get a good prime coat on it. I primed it on both sides. There's that conduit that's running down the bottom that takes my wires, so no wires are exposed on the top or the bottom. There it is, painted. There's the seat back. There's the finished go-kart. And if you want to look at and I'm not trying to sell this, I do sell them, but unless you're in Central Texas, it's not worth shipping. But there's a YouTube link, but you can just go to YouTube and go Doug Green X clamping table, and it should come up. It's a pretty neat table. Anyway, that concludes this video. And if you like, subscribe. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to go through maybe more about the burn table, and more about Go Power Sports, and more about the tubing notcher and tubing bender, which there's a ton of video on those products, but I thought I'd just add my 2 cents. Anyway, I hope that helped a little bit, and thank you for watching.